Welcome to the Bad Roman Podcast. On this show, we talk with veterans, community leaders, Christians and non-Christians as we explore the entanglement of Christians with the state. The Bad Roman Project was created out of the firm belief that as Christians, we are called to follow Christ, not the state. Here is your host, Craig Hargis.
Hey, folks. As we move closer to Election Day, we see more and more of the statism that most of us abhor. There are Democrats and Republicans at the forefront, but what about libertarians? I find it fascinating that libertarians act as if they are immune to statism. So I invited Jeremy Harding on the show to discuss all of this.
Let's go. Yeah. Left, right, left, right, left. We got our marching orders, man. Left, right. We'd rather serve God than serve Caesar, you feel me? Right. I'm just trying to live what he said. I'm just trying to live what he said.
Jeremy, how are you doing?
Reasonable, you? I got my green tea.
Green tea. I got a little bit of Gatorade and some water. So
as somebody from SoCal, it's like embedded in my DNA. Like, I'm not sponsored by these people, but I have to have Arizona every once in a while.
I haven't drank an Arizona tea in ages. It feels like.
Yeah. Well, see, it's something though, like that's embedded in your brain. It's like a mind virus.
The Arizona tea is.
Yeah. It's like you remember exactly how this tastes.
Well, you've given us a little bit of background of yourself, but what I'd like to do with the new people on the show, especially, is to let the listeners know a little bit about them. Tell us whatever you want us to know, and then we'll get into libertarianism a little bit today. So
I'm an anarchist. Conspiracy theorist. I'm very black-pilled. I think we're all going to die. There are too many genuinely evil people with their hands on too many red buttons they're itching to push. And I think that this is all going to go up in flames because the system is fundamentally unstable and run by fundamentally unstable people. I routinely talk about all of the ways in which this could go sideways. And in general, the primary thing that I've been opposing is the rise of what I call technocratic fascism and the technological surveillance superstate that are leading to basically a fascist dystopia. And the people who claim to oppose that are often the people who will support it in the forms that are more palatable to them and sort of like demonize people who push back against that. Like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are abjectly and objectively evil. These people, Peter Thiel runs, defense manufacturing and intelligence, like mega corporations that are directly connected to the superstructure. He's on the steering committee for the Bilderberg Group. He's like a massively popular libertarian figure, even though he's not a libertarian. He's not. And he has a huge following of people who will defend him at the drop of a hat. And he runs something called Palantir, which is like anybody who knows what that's a reference to knows how evil that is already. But he calls himself a libertarian, and he funds a bunch of right-wing organizations, libertarian organizations. So there are a bunch of people in libertarian circles who will give him a pass. Elon Musk, very similar, and he's helping fuel the AI dystopian superstate and pushing us all on these remotely controllable and stoppable electric vehicles, getting people on board with his internet, which he can also remotely stop. Like people celebrated him when he did that with regard to Ukraine, when he said, no, I'm going to shut off the internet that I let you use because I disagree with what you're doing.
I did not know that about him. But you're right. A lot of people do celebrate him. I don't know much about him other than, if I've heard him on the Rogan podcast or something.
Yeah.
And I guess he runs X. I don't really spend a whole lot of time on Twitter or X because I don't really understand what's going on there. But
well, he specifically, he gave Ukraine internet for operational stability, right? He gave them internet for operational stability, then shut it off because he disagreed with one of the decisions they were going to make. They were going to attack a part of Russia, I believe. So if he can do that to them because he doesn't like a decision they're going to make, he could do it to any of you. And for people out there who says, well, no, but he's freedom of speech, he wouldn't do that. He already complies with 83% of censorship requests from authoritarian governments on Twitter. So, like, he's going to do that to other people. He's going to, like, flex his anti-free speech garbage with other people. And when it comes down to it, like, these people will watch that happen. And as long as it's happening to their enemies, they will celebrate. They will say that it's awesome. An example of it is when leftists got pushed off Twitter recently, a bunch of right-wing libertarians said nothing because they were supporting his free speech lie, but they were opposing the Israeli genocide of Palestinians. That's all they were doing. They were voicing their political stances in this regard. And he mass censored a bunch of them all at once because of that. And so when it comes down to actual free speech, he is nil. He is not interested. But they defend him anyway. And this is just an example here. So libertarians have a fundamental problem of defending terrible people when it comes to getting what they want. As long as they can get the power that they want, they will defend the worst of the worst. A good example of this is Jeremy Kauffman and the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire Twitter accounts, who will routinely say objectively evil things that are in support of authoritarian right-wing positions, and get away with it because they don't like trans people, or because they don't like migrants, or because they don't like some group that the libertarian right likes to go against. It's like the group du jour. And as a result of this, they have lost, because of the messaging, they have lost money, they have lost members, they have lost opportunities for the Libertarian Party as a whole, because they're like, well, we don't want to be affiliated with that. I've had people on my show who've watched it happen and been behind the scenes in libertarian chats and circles, and those people have confirmed to me that basically this messaging has lost them a huge amount of their support, in various libertarian circles, because of the messaging that they've used, the fact that he told various black people to go back to Africa, the fact that he consistently posts against LGBT people in a variety of contexts. Now, you could say, you don't like those people, but the idea that we should be opposing them as a libertarian group, if that's the case, what makes that different to the mainstream right-wing parties? What makes it different? Well, not much. Not much at all. And when it comes down to it, if you're trying to secure votes, if you're trying to say that we should be different, the party that's anti-woke, anti-migrant, pro-cop, pro-troop, LGBT needs to be pushed out and physically removed and all that. If you're that party, you're the Republicans. If you're the party of anti-degeneracy, you're the Republicans. That's what the Republicans do.
I've noticed that quite a bit with libertarians, is especially what you're talking about. And I'm pretty naive to a lot of what goes on with the party because I don't care. I don't care about party politics, but I know people who support a lot what's going on. Like when the Mises Caucus came about, I saw all this coming about, and I'm like, hang on a second. These folks are calling themselves anarchists, and they're running for political office. They're pushing an anarchist agenda through the party to get a message out. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. How you can call yourself an anarchist and do this? And I've said it over and over on the show that I don't use the phrase or the term anarchist very often anymore because it's been the messaging is so confused now by libertarians to me. So when I hear people talking about anarchy, nobody knows what that word means anymore to me. I mean, some people do know what it means, but they're people who are actual anarchists understand what it means. Now, people who call themselves anarchists to me don't understand what it means to be an anarchist. If you're running for political office, you're supporting a political candidate, you're working through party politics. And so you're right. To me, they're just Republicans. You're not any different than what I came from. I left the Republican Party to get away from that. And now you're just the same pretty much to me, which really kind of made me flee to anarchy, to be honest with you.
So the first thing I'll say in that regard that, I think is, valuable to broach, there's something to be said. Whether or not that's accurate, whether or not that meets itself out in the end is another story. But there's something to be said about trying to reduce the power of government if the mechanism works. I don't think it does, and I think as a whole, it's a mass misallocation of funds, power, platform. I think if the people who did libertarian activism just instead directly funded and created structures alternate to the way things are, if direct action was the mechanism, that there would be so many more people interested in joining up to a real alternative to the political system. And I personally don't advocate the Libertarian Party process. And I routinely point out to people how the Libertarian Party process is inherently corrupt and has been more and more corrupted over time. So personally, I don't do it. Although there are people literally asking me to do a presidential run in the next one when I'll be old enough, because I'm 32. I'm not old enough for presidency yet. But if I chose to do that, it would only be to be extremely antagonistic to the people on stage, and they wouldn't be able to do anything about it because I'm an official candidate and I would be up there in an official capacity. So there is some temptation to use it as a messaging platform. And there's also some temptation based on my, sort of transition away from statism, as it were, starting with the Libertarian Party, then Ron Paul, then realizing that basically none of these people were going to be given any access at all because the system is designed to preserve itself. And then, anarchy, and then really extreme anarchy, where I'm supporting all sorts of anarchy in the form of bottom unity. I'll work with communists, I'll work with egoists, I'll work with Christian anarchists, I'll work with all of them, because I think that there's this fundamental underlying thing where we are being divided as anarchists in the same way that everybody else is being divided as people. And I think that that's a mistake. I think we should be working with anybody trying to assist in moving forward for freedom.
I agree with that. I agree with that so much too, because I think anarchists are divided themselves, and I think it does liberty a disservice, like the Libertarian Party does liberty a disservice, and I think if the idea, and I'll hear this over and over from libertarians who you're not really doing anything if you're not participating. We're trying to reduce the size of government. We're trying to have less government. And I keep thinking to myself, and I'll say it out loud to them too, are you not paying attention to what the hell's going on? Because you're not going to get access to this. You're not going to reduce the size of government. And like you said, it is designed to preserve itself. And I think it's just completely naive. And I've come to the conclusion, and this is just my opinion, the only way out of this is to completely walk away from it and ignore them out of existence. And I think the continuing to participate in this stuff is just legitimizing that process and legitimizing their authority. Walk away from it. Ignore them out of existence. Let's try that, because we're not doing it. The only thing to me that you're doing is just keeping it going. You're preserving the system by legitimizing it, by participating. I get so frustrated with libertarians on this topic. And I hate election years. I hate social media during election years. I hate watching TV during election years. I hate the break room during election years because people are talking about it, because nobody's paying attention to what's going on. And I've witnessed this over and over from libertarians too. They are one of the quickest to lose or compromise their principles when it comes to trying to gain some sort of power in government. We saw when they invited Donald Trump to their convention. What was that? I mean, come on. When I saw this, and then I saw Dave Smith talking about defending it and really calling out libertarians, saying this, I can't remember what he said. That guy gets on my nerves. But
he said you have to be respectful and be respectful because we're not a bunch of college leftists.
Yeah, but I was thinking, and people defend this man. I'm like, wait a second. You invited Donald Trump, a known war criminal, to your political convention. Isn't the Libertarian Party supposed to be the party of peace?
Mm-hmm. Party of principle.
Anti-war party?
Yeah.
What the hell? How can you look at this? Now, to be fair, I saw libertarians upset with this too.
Right.
It seemed like there was a lot of the right side of the Libertarian Party was very excited about having Donald Trump. The other people were like, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense.
A few things. I would say, I support walking away, but I will not ignore them. What I will do, however, is actively antagonize everyone. I am antagonistic. I am.
Oh no, I agree with. I'm the same way. So when I say ignore them, meaning don't participate in their process.
Right.
We know they exist. Everybody knows they exist.
I got called, and it's stuck. I've used this as part of my branding ever since. The most aggressively negative person on Liberty Twitter.
I like it.
Yeah,
you should be proud of that.
Yeah, and he said, after that, he said, "Get help," and then blocked me. I thought that was hilarious. He deleted his account since, but I hope whoever you were, I don't remember your username or anything about you, but I hope you're doing well. And so, my general thing here is, they invited Trump because it meshes, and it meshes too well because of accessions that they've already made. So, I've been at this a while. I just reconnected with somebody the other day who, Scott Bowman, who, posted a bunch of, articles I wrote about his situation, a decade ago in this Discord that I joined recently, because I'm helping those people get publicity for their situation, where they're, experiencing what amounts to a fascist takeover of their state in the Libertarian Party. And I reconnected with this guy, and he was posting articles that I had written about his situation on a now defunct site that I wrote a decade ago. So I've been in this for a while. That's just me flexing my cred for all those of you who say you don't do anything. To be super clear, the things that I've seen ever since have been the reason that I've become disenfranchised, the reason that I've walked away from the party in general, is because those people have proven themselves to be compromised, and also compromised away from unity and toward the right. So, Liberty Hangout. I did a debate, and I used the extreme air quotes, with Jared Howe, Justin Moldo, and Eric July of Backwards. And I did this because the Liberty Hangout folks believed in border control, and I was an anti-borders anarchist already. I was already supporting the idea that there should not be borders, and that borders themselves are an invention of the state. And in this debate, basically, it was going to be me versus Howe, and then it was me versus Moldo and Howe, and then by the end of it, I was sort of against all three, including the moderator, Eric July. And these three people are sort of a primer into why I am the way I am, because it's when you look at how these people's trajectory went, Justin Moldo went full MAGA, and it I think married Caitlin Bennett.
Yeah, I know this guy. I know who you're talking about. He was one of the first people I encountered when I first got into libertarian circles, and I didn't really know anything much about libertarianism, but I'm very familiar with the Liberty Hangout bunch. So I no longer have anything to do with them, but you know what I'm saying. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and so Justin Moldeau gets with Caitlin Bennett, becomes progressively more and more MAGA, and eventually turns Liberty Hangout into a Trump worship outlet, where like this outlet that previously used to have pretty based things to say about non-voting and being, consistent libertarians and et cetera, is now saying we, quote, want to infiltrate libertarianism and make it right wing, like Donald Trump for president and Trump. And so this was before he was president. And in the lead up to his being president, they were already sort of on board. And when he got voted out or selected out, or however you interpret what happened that led to J6, when that happened, they were all in on this was rigged. Donald Trump is the actual president, and we support his reign forever, blah blah. He was chosen by God. and when you start to go down that path, it's only so long until you alienate every single actual libertarian left in your audience. And they did, and now the profile is locked, and now the primary outlet Justin Moldeau uses is called Catholic Hangout.
Really?
And, yeah, so he's running a new project entirely devoted to Catholicism, and he's at the head of it. Because if you want to hear the message of Christ and the gospel, you know who I want to hear from? I want to hear from a guy who supported a fascist war criminal.
Makes sense. Makes total sense.
Yeah, bootlicking. And so that's one of the people. Jared Howe became more and more radicalized toward the authoritarian right until he eventually started to make a Nazi podcast that was syndicated on Christopher Cantwell, the Crying Nazis website. And he was directly supportive of the Nazi messages that Chris would put out. And Chris was directly supportive of the Nazi messages Jared would put out. And this was syndicated on his site. So when Chris Cantwell went to, automatically syndicated. So when Chris Cantwell went to prison, Jared's show was the only thing posting on his website. So if you went to Chris Cantwell's website for years, it would be full of Jared Howe's material, getting support for its Nazi garbage. And that guy and Justin Moldeau were still directly, for the vast majority of this, affiliated with Eric July, lead singer of Backwards, the guy behind these new Ripiverse comics. And Eric July himself runs the Being Libertarian page, which is basically a pro-Trump outlet at this point that supports a variety of authoritarian right-wing positions. And also, just because I got to say this for some homies out there who had this happen to them, are massive meme thieves. They will just jack your meme that you made, maybe change some things about it, but basically say the exact same thing, putting in zero work, and put their watermark on it, and then re-release it as though they did that. It's happened so many times to so many people that it's now a thing that is routinely discussed. And they do this so that they can effortlessly create this echo chamber of right-wing nonsense. They're directly affiliated with all these other meme pages like Declaration of Memes and all these other things. And Eric July runs that to the point where when an article critical of Tom Woods was published on his website, he immediately deleted that and called the person who did it a hoe. Now, say what you want about John Hudak, but just simply deleting the post says quite a bit about preservation of operational image. And when it comes down to it, what they were doing there, they were isolating that. They were saying we can't have any criticism of any figures that we're trying to consistently support and exclusively never condemn. And it's this sort of thing that your Christian viewers will be happy to know is against the Bible. It's against Matthew 7 specifically. and you're supposed to like remove the plank from your own eye so you can see clearly to take the speck from your brother's. And these people have been having lumberyards growing in their eyes to the point where they have so many problems with statism and authoritarian garbage in their ranks that whenever you point this sort of thing out, you're the bad guy. They've grown to accept authoritarianism within their ranks. And this, I think, is relatively well typified by the modern sort of Mises Caucus shift. Because the modern Mises Caucus shift is like, I supported some of what they were doing in the beginning, but then it became clear that you couldn't oppose these people on anything. Like, the first time it started to be clear was when they were supporting an anti-war rally that was directly affiliated with a bunch of pro-war people who just wanted Putin to win. Like, their version of being anti-war is, well, if Ukraine would just let Putin win, we wouldn't be in this situation. And a lot of these anti-war libertarians are also just Putin supporters, like Lori Price, the person behind Mike Rechtenwald's campaign, being like on legitgov.org, a site that Mike Rechtenwald helped start and still promotes, just 100% praise for Putin. He's liberating areas. He's the rightful person, Ukraine should just give up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All this stuff, right? All these obvious problems. And the general gist of it is that, like, this site loves Trump also. So that's one example. Sal Mayweather is another example. And he's also, a content thief of a variety of ways. But he will support Putin at pretty much any angle, and says, like, Putin is based. I think that's one of the things he said. And he said directly to me that Putin is helping take out the trash, along with Javier Milei and Augusto Pinochet. That these are the sorts of people he looks up to as solving the problems that we have.
Hey folks, do you like salsa? I love salsa. I have come up with a fire recipe, and we have been shipping this homemade salsa all across the country. If you like salsa and want a cool way to support the project and spread the message of no king but Christ, then holler at us. You can reach us at badromansalsa@gmail.com or visit the official Bad Roman Salsa Facebook page and message us there. Thank y'all so much for your continued support. Now let's get back to the show. I really want to talk about Javier Millay. You just brought him up, and if you got anything else to add to that, what you were just saying, because what I've noticed a lot with these people, and I wanted to say this too, and I don't know if this is going to upset people or not, but a lot of these people that you're talking about, I don't know all of them, but I know most of them. I think that they seem to be grifters, and they're just trying to make a dollar, and they'll go in any direction that they can to make some money. And I've noticed that with a lot of people in the libertarian circles, factions, or whatever you want to call them. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, unfortunately. And like, just to finish it off, and and on a real strong note, I was a Ron Paul supporter. I campaigned for him. I had bumper stickers on my car before I fucked up the engine and before I damaged the engine and couldn't drive it anymore. And like, when I had these bumper stickers, I also had like literature, information I could hand people, and I was like a real strong Ron Paul guy, right? I had a sticker on the back of my laptop too, and if somebody asked me about it, I would be like, yeah, here's all the great things about Ron Paul. I was all in on Ron Paul. But Daniel McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute, not only did he defend one of the pro-war people at this rally, the pro-war person he defended was also a twice convicted child predator. And this guy that defends this person, this guy is a Putin stan, and he loves Putin. So when the guys on your side consistently find dictators to support, it might be because they're not that libertarian to begin with, or at least they're willing to give up their principles in order to support those dictators. And when it comes to the Mises Caucus, I would routinely post posts criticizing Millay. And those posts that were posted I would share to their groups. And those posts were the only posts that got rejected for months. And so I got 50 some odd posts rejected because those posts were accurately critical of Javier Milei, a foreign pro-war president. And the domestic Libertarian Party was doing nothing but worshiping him on the official Libertarian National social media accounts and on the Mises Caucus accounts and on a variety of Mises Caucus accounts that were smaller than the official main one, but still affiliated with the Mises Caucus officially, and a bunch of libertarian accounts in general, just worshiping Javier Milei. So I got really irritated with this. And I disguised a video that was against Millay on my YouTube channel as being against Biden. And I called it, Biden did what to our money? And I included this nice evil picture of Biden, but I also included a subtle overlay in the thumbnail of the Argentinian flag so that anybody paying attention would notice something wasn't quite right. And so the first bit of it was me being like, well, what if Biden did all of these things? And I described all the stuff that Javier Milei was doing, like devaluing the currency so people couldn't, their purchasing power tanked. Installing facial recognition cameras, banning certain forms of protests, banning sticks at protests and masks to cover up your identity, scanning people at protests so that he could deny them government benefits or arrest them later because their faces were uncovered, or using using covered faces as a pretext to go find that person and prosecute them. Making it easier to lock up kids, making it easier to shoot anybody, making a for-profit prison system that everybody who gets convicted of a crime has to help make the state money. Hiring Patricia Bullrich to wage a war on drugs and cartels immediately, even after a campaign season of campaigning against her and saying what a horrible statist she is. Doing all of this while untold corruption, buying jets from Lockheed Martin. I don't think I included that, but I'm listing things in general now. He bought 24 jets from Lockheed Martin. He gave 2 helicopters to Ukraine. He's been holding meetings on how to best serve Ukraine. He, at this point, has been supporting the Israeli genocide of Palestinians actively by saying that he supports everything they're doing and says that they're making the right choices and will not criticize them at all. He wants to move their embassy into Jerusalem so that they can become official partners of the Israeli government. And he also wants NATO membership. He wants 2% of their government's resources a year going to a NATO membership. And he wants all of this while working actively with the Biden administration and Janet Yellen to make their program in lockstep with American policy and a bunch of other things that are, let's just say, suspect from somebody who says that he doesn't like the central bank of his own country, but he loves the American central bank. He'll put us on the dollar. He'll put the Argentinian people on the dollar. And he's also deporting criminals and not allowing anybody who's been convicted of crimes in. He's increasing taxes on the poor. He's throwing people out of government programs and out of their houses. He's getting IMF loans and, all these criticisms. I can't remember how many of them I included in the video, but I can say that a lot of these were already happening and a lot of them were in the video. And let's just say I got banned from the Mises Caucus Facebook group, and I got blocked on both their Facebook and Twitter social media accounts because this one actually went through. They thought it was about Biden, and suddenly there was an anti-Millay video in their midst, and we can't have that. Echo chamber activate.
I love it. I was going to say this too. When I first heard about this guy, to me, as an anarchist, when you see somebody claiming to be ANCAP or whatever he calls himself, run for political power, to be president of a country, you should, to me, an anarchist should automatically like, hang on, something's not right here. Should be suspicious of it. But the opposite happened. I saw so many people, anarchists, celebrating this. I'm like, wait a second. He ran for the presidency of a country, and we're anarchists. We should oppose this.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Now, but they didn't, and they said, well, it just shows a sign of how the Argentinian people are waking up to whatever. And I said, that's not the point. This guy's claiming to be an anarchist. He ran for the presidency, won the presidency. He's not an anarchist, okay? And I've noticed too, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I've noticed too that ANCAPs and anarcho-capitalists have a tendency to lean towards statism a little bit. And I don't know if it's just something. It's just an observation. Okay, I'm not calling them status or whatever. It's just an observation that I've made along the way.
Right.
And I've also noticed too. You talked about getting blocked by the Mises Caucus. I noticed too. If you start pointing some of this stuff out about Millay, they will block you.
Yes.
I've had two very prominent, quote unquote, prominent libertarians. I don't know how prominent they are. Jack and Fo Lloyd blocked me because I don't know if you're familiar with them, but he was talking about Millay, and I got on there. All I said was, "This dude is going to break a lot of libertarian hearts." I said because he's not what you think he is. And then then I started pointing out his support for Israel and this genocide in Palestine. Okay, as soon as I pointed out, I got blocked. As soon as I pointed out that what he was doing with Israel, his support for Netanyahu and Israel, they blocked me. Like, no further discussion is allowed on this topic, apparently. They're just going to end the conversation by blocking you and getting rid of you because they don't want to be challenged on this because they're hero worshipers. They worship these people, and nothing against Ron Paul. I said, and the guy said a lot of great things, and people tell me all the time that he led them to where they are as anarchists now. That's great.
Right.
But he never claimed to be an anarchist, okay? And there's a hero worship about Ron Paul, too. Now, to me, if you've got to this point as an anarchist, even if you've learned through this stuff through Ron Paul, you're an anarchist now. Why are you reverting back to statism and getting involved with this stuff? And I don't want to get too far off on Ron Paul because I think he has a lot of great things to say. Don't get me wrong, but this Millay character, I don't trust him. And whenever I started reading about his support for Netanyahu and Israel, I was like, okay, now there's talk of him even wanting to convert to Judaism. Which is whatever. If you want to do that, cool. But the whole he is
compromised.
Well, he's certainly compromised, but he's trying to go above and beyond by doing this, in my opinion. And we should be able to point out the discrepancies among these people without and have discussion with people like you getting blocked and me getting blocked. To me, that is so childish. And I see if you don't want to have the conversation, we could just stop talking. We could still be friends. But don't block me.
Yeah.
Because there's other things we're going to agree on. To me, that's just when your feelings get hurt like that, when you point out, this is the truth about Millay. I'm not making this stuff up. You can look it up. You can find all this information yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But don't this hero worship drives me crazy. And I see it among Christians. The only person Christians should be hero worship, and should be Jesus, not some political figure. I don't understand this, man. And I want you to continue with Millay. And when we end, I want you to talk about that Christians should walk away from partyarchy entirely. And I agree with you 100%. But let's continue with Millay a little bit if there's more information, because I need people to understand this about this guy. This guy is going to break your freaking heart. And you got to stop with this hero worship of political figures. That's all they are. And anyway, I'm going to go on a tangent. Go ahead with Millay.
All right. If you just look at rates, if you just look at a certain window of time, if you vacuum pack things, you can make somebody look good. For instance, Javier Milei reduced inflation from 25.5% in the beginning of January to now something like 10%. That would be awesome if the reason it was 25.5% increased wasn't because of his administration. His administration raised it. It was 25.5% up. Like after he devalued the currency, after he like pushed a bunch of people off their programs, after he made it unaffordable to live in a variety of ways, after he got police to like brutalize people, after he got all this stuff that like pushed his program forward, inflation skyrocketed compared to what it was before. Like, to be clear, it's been bad. It's not been good. The inflation rate year over year has been gradually climbing in some pretty severe ways. But when you look at the actual chart, Millei's policies immediately caused a spike in inflation. And that only dropped off after months and months of people renormalizing and falling into his new regime. Which means that now, if you look at the thing, there's a bump in the inflation chart that is sunk back down to its previous existing upward line. It's not like he's dropping it below that. He's not. It's just commensurate because he didn't get all the policies that he wanted to in, like a complete destruction of the central bank, which is something that he promised, but then later said he couldn't deliver on because they would kill him. So it's like, well, fantastic. So you're saying that you can't do the thing that you said you would be capable of because the system is going to protect itself. It's almost like a libertarian presidency is an oxymoron. It's almost like once you get into that position of power, you've got to play their games and get IMF loans and, like work with the NATO, work with the U.S. Western hegemony. And he'll do all of that because he falsely calls BRICS countries communist. And he says that I won't work with communists. Well, they're capitalist. Their countries are doing the same economy that the U.S. is doing. They're just also doing it with the aesthetic of redness. But it's not actually there. Emma Goldman was right about that when she wrote that there's no communism in Russia. And Mao Zedong literally said that he was going to implement state capitalism in China. And like Lenin himself literally said that the system isn't actually fundamentally different to how it was. So when Bakunin was protesting the Bolshevik strategy, and he said that it would be just the same kind of capitalism that there was before, he was right. Bakunin famous for saying that when the people are being beaten, they don't actually care whether it's the people's stick, So it's like, it's that mentality. But Javier Milei got directly connected with a bunch of conservative figures. He went to CPAC and had emotional, like tearful exchanges with Donald Trump where he hugged the guy, and like obvious hero worship there. Like Vivek Ramaswamy as well. All these right-wing figures at CPAC. And you could just see him having these overwhelmingly excited, like a little chihuahua exchanges with these like powerful conservative figures that he was worshiping. And when it comes down to it, this guy is a good representation of many libertarians who, at the drop of a hat, at a moment's notice, will convert to the statist program as long as it gets them their relevance. A word you heard so much when they invited Donald Trump to the convention, and Vivek and RFK Jr. and all of these people. They were like, well, we just want relevance. Well, have you tried gaining relevance by having such radical principles that people will actually want to see a difference? Oh, no, that's the way that takes hard work and effort. It's better to just glom onto existing political strategies and movements and be like, nah, this is us now. No, it ain't. And it never will be. But like, there are plenty of people who've been fooled. And those people are all on board with this program. Those people love this program.
Hey folks, we have set up a very simple way to donate to the Bad Roman Project through spotfund.com. Just go to SpotFund and search No King But Christ. This has become necessary to continue to provide a quality podcast and keep production costs down as well. Just $5 or $10 a month will go a long way in helping us keep this project going and continue spreading the very basic message of No King But Christ. So if you like what we were doing and can find it within your budget, go to spotfund.com and search No King But Christ, and you can set up monthly donations or even donate one time. Any and all donations help more than you know, and as always, any donations above production costs will go directly to charities in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank y'all so much. Now back to the show.
The reason I'm bringing all of this up, the reason I'm saying all of this, is because I think, like, it's valuable to know that this isn't just a vacuum pack. Like, it's not just like Trump got invited to the convention as a one-off. There is a fundamental dishonest infiltration of MAGA people and other forms of authoritarian right-wingers in libertarian circles. And we need to push that out if we are going to succeed. And Javier Millay is just one example of it. Like, I promise you, if you're in the official Mises Caucus group on Facebook, post something anti-Millay. It will get declined. Or, question why I was removed. You might get banned. If one of your Millay posts does get through because you disguised it somehow, you will get banned and blocked and all of the things. Because they're isolating political power and they don't care about actual anarchist principles. They're partyarchs. As Konkin put it in the New Libertarian Manifesto, partyarchy is fundamentally flawed and fundamentally compromised because you're dealing with people who have already acceded to the system in a variety of ways. So those people are not going to be better when they're in charge. Those people are going to, accept lobby funds or whatever from as many people. This is the thing. Like, I have gotten so much flack for discussing co-funding in libertarian circles or the funding of various libertarian things by Peter Thiel, or the way they're just like, well, but isn't the message what matters? Does it matter who gave them the money if their message is good? And the message is sometimes okay, but let's be clear, it's not radical. It would be radical if the message was actually born from the grassroots funding and support of the common person, and they could get away with that. But you can't really speak out against right-wing oil billionaires when your funding source is the Koch brothers or the Wilkes brothers in the case of the Daily Wire PragerU crowd, or like the military-industrial complex when the person funding your organization is Peter Thiel. It's really hard to speak out against the institutions that are actually holding power and doing things actionably against libertarians if you're going to, like, at the same time accept dollars from people who attach your message to supporting their candidates, supporting the people who are going to cause these problems. And so it's sort of like, that rich guy who talked to Christ and he said, all of these things I have done, what else can I do? And Jesus was like, give all you have and follow me. Because it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And the point he was making is, this guy was trying to perform his way into good graces rather than actually, like, change fundamental things about himself. He was trying to, like, do the dance. He was trying to sort of, create the illusion that he was supporting the right side of things. But in the end run of it, like, Christ knew the contents of his heart, and he was like, you're doing this because you want something. You're not doing this because you need me. So prove that you're actually on board by, like, giving up the material possessions that have leashed you to your world, to your obligations, to your previous bad ideas. And, maybe we can talk about your spiritual walk once you're no longer fettered. And it's like this with the funding by these people, with the connection by these people to the establishment. It's like that because these people fund only people they think can carry their water. And their water is statism. Their water is tyranny. Their water is authoritarian right-wing evil. That's the reason they don't like you talking about fascism. That's the reason they don't like you opposing their Nazism. That's the reason they don't like you pointing out that these connections have existed for, as long as the Libertarian Party has. That's the reason they really don't like you to accept that there's left libertarians to begin with. Because if you start doing that and looking back to the previous libertarians before right-wing libertarians even used the term, you start to realize that these people were criticizing a lot of what these right libertarians are supporting, and in a very effective way. So you got to keep that echo chamber developed. You got to keep it formed and like keep people forced onto your paradigm, because if you don't, they'll start to say shit that might, like, they'll start to say things that might, like, disturb your paradigm. They'll start to maybe say things that are inconvenient to the path that you have chosen for the world. And these people, a lot of the time, want control. They want the reins. They say, if only I was in charge, things would be awesome. Probably not. Probably not that awesome. And so when it comes down to it, you can't serve two masters. And you certainly can't serve both God and mammon. But so many of these like libertarian politicians, they want you to think that as long as money is being made, as long as property is being transferred, as long as capital is being served, that's all that needs to happen. As NAP folks, like, as long as you don't damage somebody else's property, you're a libertarian. It's a little bit deeper than that. It's a philosophy. It's a broad-based thing that's complicated, and it's not as easy as don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. It's also like a broad-based thing of like, what culture are you supporting? What mentalities are you driving? What people are you elevating? How are you like contributing to the global culture? There's love your neighbor, and that's great. But as Christians, you're also supposed to be divided against the structures that serve evil. And like Jesus said, I come not to bring peace, but a sword. And he wasn't saying that he like wants people to go to war, but he was saying that he's going to divide people against those who would not accept the message that, we need to walk away from these structures that are fettering us, that are like enslaving us, that are forcing us onto the human systems of human control. And anybody who says differently, especially in the name of Christ, they're trying to get into your wallets. They're trying to get into your brains. They're trying to get your spirits on their side so that they can twist you against the actual real world truths that they are supporting some of the most evil things in history and letting history repeat itself again and again in the support of one empire or another. And they will all fall, all will return to dust. And you just hope you're on the right side of that at the end of it. But like, the general truth is, if you're trying for a libertarian future, if you're trying for an anarchist future, especially if you're trying to serve no king but Christ, if you're trying to have the mentality of not being of this world, then maybe you should step away from the systems that have chained you to it, because these systems have grown by wealth. They are serving of mammon. They love to chain you to material possessions and to keep you on their programs, and they hate resistance. And the ultimate resistance to these systems is to shake them off and no longer give them any power over you. The general truth is, you have to sacrifice a lot of your principles in order to get like these people's support, these people's money, these people's backing. And eventually, you'll be inviting war criminals to your convention to give campaign speeches that were supposed to be debates. You'll be inviting people like RFK Jr., coming full circle, like Jeremy Kauffman. There was a thing at PorkFest this most recent year, and there's this 3 minutes soapbox thing where you can go on this soapbox and say whatever you want. It's a free speech zone, right? And you can sit there and say like whatever you want for 3 minutes. It's a libertarian tradition at PorkFest, a libertarian convention, for those of you who don't know. I've never been. I probably won't ever go because I feel like it's a hive of scum and villainy. But at the same time, the PorkFest this last year, there was a dad who lost his daughter, and he was like basically crying on stage. He lost his daughter, and he believes firmly that the reason he lost his daughter was because of the vaccine. And this man used his 3 minute soapbox speech to say things about that. And Jeremy Kauffman and his cowardly approach threw him off the stage and hurled slurs and a bunch of things that I can't repeat in polite company. But he did this to this father, this small figure, because Jeremy Kauffman, much like other fascists, relies on picking on the weak, picking on people that they believe that they can like speak out against without getting any pushback. And when he threw this guy off the stage after insulting him in the free speech time, so many people cheered for that. So many people cheered for that. You know who he didn't throw off the stage? You know who he didn't protest? You know who was too big for Jeremy to go over there and criticize and browbeat and try to act all superior over? RFK Jr., who was like given enough accessions at Porkfest that they literally installed gun control checkpoints in a place where there aren't those normally, because libertarians like to go there and be armed. He got gun control checkpoints at his particular event. And he's a much bigger figure in anything vax critical than this dad could ever possibly be. Very likely. It's unlikely that you would find a bigger, more prominent anti-vax person at Porkfest that year than RFK Jr. And who did Kauffman go after? A father who lost his daughter. That's who Jeremy Kauffman went against.
I'm glad I don't know this guy. I don't know who he is. I'm glad I don't know who he is because that pisses me off. I don't know who he is, and I'm glad I don't know who he is because I would probably have several words with him myself. Let's wrap this up, and we've got a little over an hour now. I think we could talk for hours because this has been pretty fascinating. I've learned some stuff today that I had no idea about. I really wanted to kind of pin you down on the Millay stuff because it's something that's bothered me when I first saw it come about. I'm glad that you came on to talk about that and all this other stuff as well, because it's pretty eye-opening to the stuff that, I mean, I've been suspicious of Libertarian Party for a while, been suspicious of libertarians for a while, but when you hear some of this stuff going on, I hope, folks, if people don't believe what Jeremy is saying today, reach out to him. Reach out to him. And I know he's easily accessible. And he'll have a conversation with you. Don't block him either if he pisses you off. If he says something that upsets you, don't block him. But have the conversation with him, because I think we need to have these conversations to recognize that it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, or Libertarian. If you're still trying to access the system to gain some sort of relevance or power, especially as a Christian, you're not following the teachings of Christ. Okay? You're following the teachings of the state, the teachings of Satan. You need to follow the teachings of Christ. Now, that being all said, why don't you plug everything that you do? I know you said you got your own show as well, and you do a lot longer episodes than we do on our show. So why don't you tell people where they can find all your stuff at? And I'll let you get out of here.
Jeremiah Talks on YouTube. I'm Insanity is Free on Twitter. I'm that pretty much everywhere because it's an edgy name that I took in high school. And I never really got rid of it because it's like nobody chooses that name for some reason. I think it's probably because it's somewhat insulting to the mentally ill. But with all that being said, if you want to find my edgy content everywhere and get black-pilled and like get plugged into some like actually authentically radical ideals, I'm happy to have you. And there's a variety of other places that I'm affiliated with. I've written for Agorist Nexus for a long time. I've written a piece for Free Thought Project. I'm like doing a site now for anarchist unity purposes where people can post original content to there if they so choose. It's free right now, like in terms of like I can't pay people yet, but like eventually we'll be getting that going too. But it's called anarchunity.com. So if people wanted to start posting there, they could just hit me up for an account and I'll get you plugged into our encrypted chat room. So with all that being said, I'm here for the long haul. I think that ultimately, like, these sorts of people have gotten their hooks into liberty circles and convinced people that liberty circles, all you need to do is be sufficiently anti-woke or something like that, and that's all you need. Well, that's not all you need, and it's certainly not all you need to be a Christian. And the Bible, especially Matthew, is convicting of so many libertarians and so many alleged Christians. And my message to anybody out there right now who's like a Christian thinking about this stuff, before you listen to anything I have to say, go reread Matthew. Because if you haven't read that in a while, that's a book that you need to like brush up on. It's ultimately, to me, the best criticism of modern Christianity. And it already was written. It already was. All you got to do is read that and find out what Jesus really thought. And with that being said, if you want to find my insane black pilling elsewhere, just listed all of that, and some of it will probably be in the description.
Yes, sir. We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah, I think I go back and forth on which of the four Gospels I like the most, but I think I've landed on the Book of Matthew as being my favorite. I really do enjoy reading that Gospel for sure. All right, man, I'm going to let you get out of here. And folks, go check out Jeremy's stuff and reach out to him and let him enlighten you on some of this stuff. This has been a fascinating conversation today. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Most people don't have the stones for it.
We're here to talk to everybody. You talked about echo chamber earlier. I'm pretty proud of the fact that we don't make this an echo chamber. I try to talk to anybody that's willing to, that just has a kind of an inkling for freedom.
For sure.
I don't care where you're coming from at it. Let's talk about it, and then we'll get your stuff out there.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Bad Roman Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcasts to never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, it really helps people find us. 100% of donations are given to local charities in Memphis, Tennessee. To learn more about the Bad Roman Project and to find show notes, please visit thebadroman.com.